Sorry, Assalamu alaikum everyone. My name is Mustafa Hassan. I'm a PADI IDSS trans instructor in Pakistan, and today we have two amazing guests, Mr. Amer Khan and our beloved Heba Hashimi. Okay, so before moving further, let me give a recap. By the way, the diving season has been started in Pakistan, especially in the area of Sindh, and we just dived day before yesterday, and the dive was amazing. Those guys who wants to experience scuba diving, please do log into our website in www.induscuba.com, and or you can drop us an email at info@induscuba.com. So let's meet our first guest, Mr. Amer. How are you?
Oh, very well, thanks.
And a small window we have Heba. Heba, how are you doing?
I'm good.
Perfect. So Amer, Heba, by the way, guys, Heba was here in the last show, so we already know who is she. So we're gonna focus more on Amer Saab. So Amer Saab, tell us who you are.
Ooh, okay. Where to begin? My name's Amer Khan. So I'm a maritime archaeologist. I've been working in Australia. I've been based in Australia mostly and working in the Asia Pacific region for a while. I guess from a diving point of view, I'm a PADI dive master, and I'm also what's called a commercial diver. So that's sort of non-recreational diving qualifications, and that's really in relation to the work I do. Let's see. I grew up in Lahore mostly. From Karachi originally. My family is. I've been overseas really longer than I've lived in Pakistan now.
Okay.
Just because having gone to university and then working overseas, it's been way longer than I'd like to admit. But I've been coming back every other year, and it's been fantastic to see diving develop in Karachi and Pakistan.
Alhamdulillah, it is. Yeah.
And really for maritime archaeology to now also possibly emerging. So I'm back in Karachi, and it was a real pleasure to meet Heba, who is also a maritime archaeologist and is also really interested in the heritage of Pakistan and really getting involved in maritime archaeology specifically. So we've been I guess in terms of who I am, that's probably the outer shell or the outer layer of the onion, if you like. I can get into more details.
So tell us your journey into scuba diving specifically.
Scuba diving.
Yeah.
Okay. So I started scuba diving in 1992. This was my first year at university.
Okay.
And so I did an open water course, and that was with NAUI, which is similar to PADI.
Yep.
And did the whole pool diving. And this was in New Haven, Connecticut. It's a very cold environment. And I did it just before the winter, so they couldn't take us for our open water dives as soon as we finished the pool part of it. So we waited a few months, and then we went into the Long Island Sound, which is a really pretty horrible diving experience if it's your first time diving.
Right,
anyway.
right.
It's pretty challenging. So that was probably the earliest my sort of first experience. But I'd probably say my father's ex-Navy, so my interest in the ocean is probably older than me and older than I know. I probably have some salt water coursing through my veins. So he was in submarines, and so diving is something that I don't know if I've consciously been interested in it, but it's something I've been involved in for a while. And I'd say since then it's been an adventure. I've been working in specifically most of the time in Australia, but I've been diving on and off in various parts of the world, both for work and recreationally as a diver.
So you talked about a bit of commercial diving, right? So that's not our main theme for today, but is there a big difference in recreational and commercial diving? I mean,
there is a definite separation of the two, partly because you use different equipment. So you can use scuba in an occupational environment, But then there's different levels of this. So it goes right up to saturation diving and doing sort of working on oil and gas sort of installations where it's a very different set of surface supplied air supplies and things of that nature. So it's the transition from recreation to occupation is a very clear separation. A lot of what I do is done on scuba, but we also work in some very challenging and high-risk environments at times.
Okay.
And so you have to be able to move up in terms of how you manage those risks, and that's when you get into the commercial. So it's a surface-supplied air, use hard hat helmets.
Kirby
Morgan's and the other variations as well. And you get into sort of welding and using tools and pneumatic tools and hydraulic tools underwater as well. So if you're looking at some excavation work, it actually requires underwater dredges and tools that are operated from the surface. But I've worked with other types of hydraulic tools and things as well. So that's more where you're not really just relying on recreational scuba skills. You have to train up a little bit more.
Right. So another question, right? I have a lot of questions for you, so
Okay,
I'll keep asking you.
Sure.
Okay. How do you come across into scuba?
Okay,
How do you find us?
So look, I've been traveling back to Pakistan every other December. Chutiyon mein hum aate the, to that was a regular thing. So I never quite brought my dive gear back, and it was always the winter. I was never aware of whether there was diving happening, and then I think I just saw something online. I probably Googled it. So it would have been in the last 10 years since we've had Google.
Yes.
And I came across into scuba. I came and saw you a couple of years ago. So in 2017, we went out to Chagna Island, and you had a few students and a few certified divers, and I was really excited. This was going to be, a great dive on Chagna, and I'd been snorkeling to Chagna before, but I'd never quite scuba at that stage. So I think we got there, and then you called it. You were like, "This viz is not good enough for my students. We're going to have to come back." So which we made the right call. Right. So we aborted that dive, and I've come back since, but I didn't get an opportunity to actually go diving. And then this time around, 2 days ago, this was, I guess, the first night for the season.
Yes.
We went out on Wednesday, and it was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
It was a lot of fun.
Great. Okay, another question, right? Okay. You talked about something about archaeology, right? Especially maritime. So, can you give us a brief? What is a maritime archaeology?
Okay.
I think you are a specialist on that.
Well,
sort of.
Yeah.
Sort of. Somewhat.
I mean, it's a part of archaeology. So in a way, it's really no different than archaeology as a whole. But it requires certain specialized skills, and it has now developed into its own sort of discipline as well. So it sort of sits alongside archaeology. But if you think about maritime archaeology or maritime cultures, really it's the study of people in the past and what they were doing, why they were doing it, and what decisions they made, and really it's about understanding those cultures in particular. Now there are different ways of going about it. Diving is a part of it because a lot of maritime cultural material, shipwrecks and cities and ports that are on the coast are underwater now. So you have to dive to actually investigate these sites. But you don't have to. So this is one of the things about, do I have to be a diver to be a maritime archaeologist? And the answer is no. You don't have to be. But there are certain sites which are strictly underwater. So to get to those sites, yes, it helps. Atlantis as well, absolutely. Always get asked that question.
It's either Indiana Jones or it's Atlantis.
Sure. So I mean, it's definitely a part of it. There is now, I mean, with technical diving, you can dive a lot deeper than typical recreational divers. And that, mind you, hasn't really worked its way into the commercial area as much. But that form of technical diving is extending the reach of the diving and scientific community now. But you're looking at underwater archaeology the study of maritime cultures, whether it's underwater or on land. There are other aspects to it. There's nautical archaeology, which is sort of the study of shipfaring and ships and the technology of ships. I mean, if you think about up to maybe the industrial age, what was the most complicated structure people built? I mean, what was the spaceship of the space shuttle of their time? These were ships. These were the most advanced technologies went into building these sorts of structures. So this was the pinnacle of technology at that time. At any point in time, you're sort of capturing that the very sort of apex of the technological capabilities at the time. And you can also see it reflected in buildings and structures, but really the ships were quite unique in that way. They were the most complicated things people would work on.
And navigation.
And navigation. So there are others aspects to maritime archaeology where it's not just the technology of the building of these structures and these ships, it's also how they were used, how people traveled at the time and communicated in trade routes, how far offshore they could travel. There's also an anthropological aspect to this, and this is where archaeology moves into heritage, not just and intangible parts of heritage. So what are seafarers today doing? How are they navigating? How are they building their boats, making their sails? How do they fish? How do they live off the sea? And there's this idea of a landscape. When we look at the land, we can look out onto the ocean. But when a fisherman or someone who is from a maritime culture, they actually look back at the land from the sea. So we can see a landscape, but they see a seascape. And so how they understand the sea, how they get to know places, like you and I have both been on boats where we have no idea where we are on the water without a GPS, but the person driving the boat can say, you go this way, अच्छा फिर इधर 15 मिनट इस तरफ चलें, फिर इधर रुकें, फिर इस पत्थर के साथ उधर जाना है. So they just have an innate understanding of the sea in ways that non-maritime cultural people don't, and that's an anthropological question for us today, is to really talk to fisher folk, talk to navigators, talk to the elders in the community to understand how and a lot of this information, a lot of this knowledge has been carried forward over hundreds of years at times. So these are old traditional trading routes. So this is also another really interesting part.
And the knowledge, they keep on, passing to their next generation.
Exactly. So there are a few different. There's this lovely book about navigating in the Pacific, and I'm sure similar studies have been done around the world. But I'm really looking forward to understanding a bit more about how people navigate along the Makran coast, the northern Indian Ocean, Arabian Sea area. People are moving well beyond the coastline. So one way to navigate, quite simply, is you see a mountain in the distance, you know where you are, right? And then you can navigate by the stars. So there's some really specialized knowledge that exists in these communities, and trying to uncover that and reveal that is quite interesting. Heba and I were at a really interesting talk last week about mapping and the use of maps in the Islamic world, and particularly areas that include the Indus and the Makran coast. And so mapping is another part of the sorts of things we would be interested in as archaeologists. There's a lot of technology in archaeology, so the use of remote sensing, geophysics, things like using sonar and metal detection in its various forms, trying to see without digging up things, because you need to use special technology for doing that. And so people interested in technology may find parts of maritime archaeology really interesting. People with an interest in history would immediately connect to it in the same way that they would connect to land archaeology, the Egyptians or the Mayans or any other civilization that's got a footprint on land but also on the water.
Right.
I've gone on. I mean,
I have to hold you here. Guys, we'll come back. The topic is maritime archaeology, and today we have Amer Khan and Heba Hashimi. We'll be back just after this break. बहुत शुक्रिया वापस आने का। आज हमारे साथ दो बहुत ही अच्छे स्कूबा डाइवर्स सर्टिफाइड प्रोफेशनल लेवल के, एक आमिर खान साहब हैं हमारे साथ, दूसरा हेबा हाशमी है। आमिर साहब से हमने बहुत लंबी बात करी थी। उन्होंने अपने बारे में बताया, इंडस स्कूबा कैसे आया, स्कूबा डाइविंग कैसे करी, मैरीटाइम आर्कियोलॉजी में कैसे घुसे और कैसे उन्होंने अपना प्रोफेशन बनाया। ये सवाल हम ज़रूर करेंगे उनसे थोड़ी देर में कि मैरीटाइम आर्कियोलॉजी स्पेसिफिकली टू अंडर वाटर, वो डाइवर्स जो वो स्कूबा डाइवर्स जो सर्टिफाइड हैं पहले से, वो इस फील्ड में कैसे एंटर हो सकते हैं। सो दैट वुड बी माय वन ऑफ द क्वेश्चन, राइट। मिस हिबा, कैसी हैं आप?
बिल्कुल ठीक, अल्लाह का शुक्र।
सो हिबा हमारे साथ लास्ट सेशन पे थी विद शेन। इन लोगों ने बेसिकली बात करी थी स्पेसिफिकली टू स्टूडेंट्स जो डाइवर्स बनना चाह रहे हैं और उन्होंने अगर मैरीटाइम सब्जेक्ट पढ़ना है तो हिबा वाज देयर। सो हिबा, जस्ट टेल अ फ्यू वर्ड्स अबाउट योरसेल्फ। क्या कर रही हो, डाइविंग लाइसेंस कौन सा है तुम्हारे पास, क्या है?
So, I'm Heba. I'm an PADI advanced open water diver,
Right.
and a maritime archaeologist now. So I went into the sort of details कि मैं यहाँ कैसे पहुँची पिछली दफ़ा, लेकिन basically यही हुआ था कि मेरा मास्टर्स मैनेजिंग आर्कियोलॉजिकल साइट्स में है, और उसके बाद मैंने खान ट्रस्ट फॉर कल्चर के साथ 3-4 साल काम करने के बाद मैंने काम छोड़ के अपनी फील्ड ट्रेनिंग की अर्लियर दिस ईयर, एंड दैट वाज इन मैरीटाइम आर्कियोलॉजी।
ज़बरदस्त। थैंक यू हिबा। हम आपका फीडबैक लिखते रहेंगे बीच में, राइट। बैक टू यू मिस्टर आमिर खान। सो आमिर खान, वी स्टॉप एट मैरीटाइम आर्कियोलॉजी, राइट। अब थोड़ा स्पेसिफाई हमें होना पड़ेगा कि एज अ प्रोफेशनल कैरियर, if someone wants to become an let's say underwater archaeologist, maritime archaeologist, तो पहले वो डाइवर हो एंड देन वो आगे जाए। सो जस्ट
डाइविंग करके फिर वो भी पाथवे है, डाइविंग के बगैर भी पाथवे है। अगर आप डाइविंग करेंगे तो एक तो पैडी ओपन वाटर करें, उसके बाद एडवांस्ड अगर आप कर सकते हैं तो इट्स मोर एक्सपीरियंस।
why advanced? Is there a specific reason behind it?
You get into certain specialties के shipwreck diving होती है, उसमें deep diving होती है,
right.
तो it's an extension of your skills। तो ये सारी चीज़ें obviously shipwrecks में तो underwater करते हैं, underwater navigation is very useful for archaeologists। Buoyancy
Yeah.
control, absolutely। So these are core skills। Basically जो भी आप करेंगे diving में it will help you as many dives as you can। जो डाइविंग की जो transition होती है into maritime archaeologist requires some postgraduate education, so you have to do a degree, usually at a master's level or higher, and it really is to explain how archaeology is done and what the purposes of it are, some of the ethics of archaeology, so the differences between somebody treasure hunting and looting sites versus someone trying to understand them for the information. So there's certain aspects of training as an archaeologist that's required. So I did some work with UNESCO in the Asia Pacific region. So we looked at training existing maritime archaeologists to become trainers of other maritime archaeologists in the Asia Pacific region. तो ज़्यादातर एक तो डाइविंग की जो भी क्वालिफिकेशंस हैं ओपन वाटर मिनिमम थी, 15 hours required थी, so not 15 dives but 15 hours।
15 hours of diving, yeah।
And then we would work them through this was sort of a field training kind of exercise, but I've been over a period of time while I was working in Australia had the pleasure of teaching some students with maritime archaeology, and usually for a master's in maritime archaeology you will finish with a dive master equivalency। So आप open water के साथ start तो कर सकते हैं मगर आपने finish करना है dive master पे, and there are reasons for this। Dive master के अगर आप देखें advanced is the next step that increases your skills। The next step after that is a rescue diver।
Right।
Why do you need rescue diver? Okay, so we are in a workplace, we're in an archaeological dig, we're investigating a site underwater। If I'm in trouble, I'm going to rely on my buddy। My buddy needs to be able to save me. So if they have rescue diver skills, I know they can save me, but I have to return the favor, so I need to have rescue diver skills as well. So the minimum we would aim for is rescue diver. Question is, why do you want to get to dive master at that final level? And the reason for that primarily is that once you finish your degree, you're involved in a number of projects where you get experience, but you will also be in a position where you have to run a project. And in that situation, you have to manage the risks for not just yourself anymore, or not just your buddy. You have to manage the risks for the whole team. And that's what gets introduced in the dive master level.
Exactly.
Where you start assessing the risks and managing the controls. How do you manage those risks? And those are the skills you need to actually function as a maritime archaeologist, where you are collaborating with other people, you're working in teams, you're working with divers and non-divers. So that's really where the minimum skill level sits for this as a profession. This may change in the future. There has been an interest in going the commercial pathway and getting into, I believe that's more construction diving. There's now a new way of thinking about the diving that we as archaeologists or biologists will do, other people who work in the underwater environment, and that's called scientific diving. So it's not construction work like the commercial divers do, it is scientific work. And there again, there's the recreational skill set to dive master, and then there's a little bit extra. There's a little bit extra training involved in that step. So प्रोग्रेसिव आपको ट्रेनिंग करनी होती है, ये होता रहता है, कुछ साल तो लगते हैं ट्रेनिंग में, both in the theory and then also in the practical dive skills में.
Right. Again, another question. You talk about something, you have done some projects with UNESCO in Asia Pacific. So, could you just elaborate what projects were there? I mean,
okay, there've been a number of interesting ones.
Okay.
So the UNESCO one, just to finish that off, that was primarily based in Sri Lanka.
Okay.
And that was looking at, it was an international UNESCO-sponsored program, and this was the early days. So there is something, this was in the mid-2000s onwards, so the second half of 2007 onwards. There's something called the UNESCO Convention for the Protection of Underwater Cultural Heritage. So this is something that all maritime archaeologists are very interested in, because it protects not just archaeological sites on land, it now says even the underwater sites are just as important, and we need to protect them. So how do we get people around the world working on this as a discipline, as a career, and building skills to do that? So this was sponsored by UNESCO. There's also something called the Asian Academy for Heritage Management, and it came together to actually deliver a series of training courses. So that was one. I'd be very keen to see if we can start some similar capacity development work in Pakistan, because really we are at that stage of those early days here now, so I think there's a great opportunity to build that capacity. Beyond the capacity development work, some interesting shipwreck sites, I think. We were speaking earlier about so one of the pleasures of the work I'm doing or have been doing in the last few years, I'm based in Queensland, Brisbane, and there's the Great Barrier Reef, which is a World Heritage Site.
Exactly.
And there are over 1,400 shipwrecks on the Queensland coast.
Oh my.
So there are more.
Purposely sink? Or
no, these are genuine
historic
catastrophic shipwrecks, and many of them are historic in nature. But also above and beyond that, there are aircraft wrecks as well. A lot of these are old enough where they are now heritage listed.
Okay.
Because once it's over 75 years in Australia, it becomes a historic site, it becomes a heritage listed site. And so there's a lot of work to try and document these sites, to firstly find them. And so there have been some beautiful areas of the Barrier Reef I've had the pleasure of getting to. I'd say one of my favorite dives is, however, this one of these sites off of Sri Lanka. It's called the Great Bass's Wreck. It's off the Great Bass's Reef, which is about 12 kilometers southeast of the Sri Lankan coast. There's the Great Bass's Lighthouse,
Okay.
And so just in the shadow of this lighthouse, there are 3 or 4 wrecks there. It dates back to the Aurangzeb period. So it's actually a Mughal, it's a wreck that is of a ship from the Mughal period. And the cargo was
the
from
silver coins with Aurangzeb.
So it's basically from the subcontinent. Beautiful shipwreck site. It is literally like a fishbowl where you are within the reef. There are anchors and cannon and the cargo, parts of the cargo, which most of the ship is gone because timber, wood doesn't really last in the ocean for very long. It gets eaten by many things. But there may well be some buried under the sand. But what is on the seabed is just in this most pristine reef. And so it's a very interesting historical site for me personally, just because while I've been in Australia, this site very much relates to the subcontinent. And it is an incredibly beautiful area. Other than that, I've worked in I was doing some work in Vietnam where we were looking at a Mongolian invasion fleet. This is, and this sort of dates back to earlier. This is more like 13th century, but it is, it's an interesting period. It's when the Mongolian Yuan dynasty was established in China, and they invaded Vietnam. So they were basically going up against the Tran dynasty, and this is the Vietnamese history from a few hundred years ago, but they were defeated by the Vietnamese because they brought their ships in, and the Vietnamese had set up traps. At low tide, it revealed these metal spikes, and so their ships got trapped on these I guess these fortifications. So it's a really interesting history, and we were looking for this invasion fleet from the Mongolian period. And the commander of this fleet, this invasion fleet, his name was Umar Khan. Yeah. So he was basically, I mean, this is sort of where this movement of the Muslim diaspora up into Central Asia as well, and so did a bit of work in Vietnam. Was in China looking at slightly earlier shipwreck. Again, this has now been recovered. It's in Zhuangzhou, which is in Fujian province in China, and it is a Chinese junk from the Song dynasty, so slightly earlier period in the 13th century. And that was, I was assisting one of my school friends, basically a university friend. He was doing his PhD on this particular site. So I've worked in the region a little bit.
Can I jump in here and go back to Vietnam for a second? Can you talk a little bit about the geomorphology aspect of the because it was a delta, wasn't it?
That's right. Yeah. So this is where so Heba and I have been talking a little bit about the Indus Delta sites, and so one of the parallels here with the Baghdan River, where one of the battles, the naval battle, happened. This is it's a river delta, and it is the area now is no longer in the river per se. There used to be a river there. Now these are fields, these are medan, and basically farmers are finding parts of these stakes that were used in the battle, and so there is a land-based archaeological investigation for this naval battle that happened. Now, my involvement in this was primarily looking at the underwater potential for these sites. So we were running side scan sonars. We were trying to see if there were any remains of shipwrecks in a particular stretch of waterways leading into the delta area. And there was a belief that this was the passage that the Mongolian fleet took. And if there had been, this wasn't a sort of battle where there was one big battle that happened. It was a war of attrition where the Vietnamese defenders were trying to just attack and goad the Yuan fleet into smaller battles, and so there were possibilities of there having been some battles along the way, smaller battles. So we were trying to see if there was something left of those battles. Zero visibility. I mean, it was seriously not the best diving, but historically very interesting. But when you get down to it, you need all your training. You've got to be able to work in zero-viz. You are literally working by feel. We're using geophysics to find the sites, and then we are saying, okay, these are the hotspots, these are the targets, and then we dive them. And so we're finding things like nets, rope, modern, not part of these historic fleets. So there was a lot of going through, false positives, let's say, what we thought could be a wreck but wasn't. What else can I talk about? The Pandora shipwreck is something that if we talk about the Great Barrier Reef,
we always focus on Pakistan, by the way.
Okay.
My viewers and I, हमें अच्छा लगेगा पाकिस्तान के बारे में बताएं.
Okay.
Did you find something in Pakistan? I think up till now something, or do you have something in history?
So I think Heba can talk a little bit about some of the Indus Delta sites.
Sure, Heba.
With that land-based.
Please.
And then,
why not?
And then we can go on to some other things.
And the thing is, to go back to your point, it's important for us to understand, because the field doesn't exist in Pakistan at the moment. It is important for us to see what's happening in the world, in the rest of the world, because the natural next step is to see how we can apply that to Pakistan. And I'm really glad that we discussed the Delta site in Vietnam, because while we have the potential for underwater archaeology in Pakistan is immense, because not only do we have the 5 rivers and then the Indus all through Sindh, we have the Delta, and then we have the whole of the Makran coast and the Sindh, the Gujarat coast. So the potential is immense. Maritime archaeology, so if we stick to the coast, at the moment I feel the Delta is a great hotspot for us to focus on, because everyone knows this. And it's in the historical records, I mentioned this last time as well, the port of Dibel, or any other port that was sort of associated with Dibel. So it was Barbaricon. It could be Meluha, which was the maritime province of the Indus Valley civilization. It could be Patala, which was there when Alexander made his way through Sindh, or out of Sindh rather. It could be, and then if we move into the sort of Pseudo-Parthian period, we have Dibel, the first mention of Dibel. And then after that there's Diol, there's all of the associated ports. So Lahiri Bandar, if anyone has been in the Delta, they'll know, they would have heard of these sites. So the Auranga port, Jaki Bandar, Ratto Court, all of these are sites and forts in our Delta. And again, we have made it as far as Pambor, as far as terrestrial archaeology is concerned, but we haven't explored the maritime potential or the underwater components to all of these sites. So the potential is immense. And this is, as I said, this is just maritime. We're not even going into rivers and lakes at the moment, but the possibilities are endless. And I think if we can use the kind of experience that you've had in similar sites and try and apply it to our context. Now we're really starting from scratch, because I believe even in the other places where you helped set the discipline up, they had some sort of groundwork there where they had their sort of pieces aligned, where like, okay, right, this is what we have, this is what we can do, and then you sort of invite external expertise or international expertise to come and really help kickstart a program. We're not even at that stage yet, because we're still trying to get our ducks in a row and to really seek it, because it's just the two of us at the moment, and trying to understand. We have all the associated infrastructure. For example, where we're sitting now, we have a dive center, and we have so the diving component is well supported. Then we have the Navy and all of the sort of organizations within that, or right, under the umbrella of the Navy. So we have, as we discussed last time, the National Center for Maritime Policy Research. We have Beria University itself, which has got, they have a geophysics program, a marine geology program, environmental sciences, maritime studies. So they have all of these things. It's just plugging in archaeology into this sort of network that already exists. And I feel like the potential for archaeology to actually bring all of these institutions together is immense. And I know we've had this conversation with Beria, and the fact that it'll really sort of help bring, because they have the Maritime Museum as well. So a lot of even from the actual research, from the initial research to the actual field work, to the sort of how would you say, not exhibition, but sort of dissemination of that research to the public and to schools and to colleges and universities and the international research community. You have all the infrastructure to sort of carry the discipline through all of those stages, but to actually bring it all together is what we have to start working on now.
Interesting.
I'd also just add something to that is that there's also a community role in this. This isn't just us as academics or people trying to get this started. I think there is a role for the diving community in particular. There are many initiatives around citizen science which are looking at ways for getting people interested in the ecology or history divers to go out and get information, to find places and report them in, or to look after places they're aware of and just sort of monitor them and say, okay, well, these are more or less, they haven't changed, or there are impacts coming from various factors that could be related to fishing in the area, or if a site has been damaged for some reason. So there is a role for the community as well in all of this, and I think that's something we can talk about, and we're hoping to be able to flesh out some of these ideas going forward, is to maybe even look at training options for divers, for members of your dive club, where they can do a quick, 1 or 2 day, training course, and it'll bring them up to speed with some very basic levels of what do I do if I find a shipwreck site? How can I help with an archaeological project underwater? What are some of the basic skills I can start with, and if I'm interested, maybe I'll take it to the next level of
by the way, that is my next question. What if a diver found something underwater? I mean,
Okay.
So
Step one.
Yeah.
So first thing is, don't touch it. Don't disturb it as such. I mean, these are very fragile archaeological sites. It's sort of, if you walked into an Egyptian pyramid and you were like, oh well, I'm going to try not to touch anything here because these are fragile. And same thing exists underwater. It's delicate. Don't move things around too much. Take as many photographs as you can. So that's the first thing, because we first want to know what it is you think you've seen, so we can say, yep, that looks like it's important, or that looks like it's a shipwreck, or it's a part of an underwater city, or whatever. We need to understand what we're looking at. The next thing is a location.
Coordinates.
Where is this thing?
The coordinates.
So you might have searched and found it. Let's not have to do another search. Let's know exactly where to go. So the second key is, where is it? So once you have these two things, then it's a matter of contacting the relevant authority, getting that information to them. By all means, talk to Heba, talk to me, talk to you, Mustafa, get the information, share it with the community, and find ways of making people aware of it. Again, this is something that as we can develop
but again,
more of a system.
The diver must be trained enough, to follow these procedures.
Yeah, so I mean, I could, if we've got time, I could spend a couple of minutes.
We have.
So there is, in Australia, there's a system called, there's a community of maritime archaeologists, and it's called the Australasian Institute of Maritime Archaeology, and we do a 2-day training course. It's called the Amer NAS course, but it basically is Australia specific, and it's a 2-day program. And it's not diving related, or rather, you don't dive for the course. Anyone can do it. So you have school children doing it, you have adults doing it, university students doing it. And it teaches you a little bit about maritime archaeology and what maritime archaeologists do, and some basic skills. What photographs to take. Believe it or not, there is not a simple way of. There's a method to taking photos, and that's covered. How to take coordinates, that's covered. How to read a map, basic skills. And this is actually derived from a system based in the UK called the Nautical Archaeological Society, the NAS system. And it's the same course, it's just localized to Australia. And I think it's early days, but we might look at trying to localize something for Pakistan.
Yeah. Yes.
Right?
And also to just add, like the Nautical Archaeology Society program is a lot, it goes beyond training as well, because the way they involve the community with things like Citizen and the Big Anchor project is literally getting people involved in the process. You don't necessarily have to have the skills down or know how to, dive or know how to go underwater and measure things or take photographs. It's even simpler, an even simpler approach is to get people to sort of take pictures of any anchor that they found and tag NAS online, or tag NAS online, and it's called the Big Anchor Project. And with that, NAS is able to develop just a repository of anchors, and they know exactly where to look. And this is something that's very simple. And we were sort of talking about how to adapt something like that to Pakistan by involving the fishing communities, because they have all the skills. I mean, the intangible heritage component of that, of what they already have in terms of skills, traditional skills, is a sort of separate conversation altogether. But just involving them in helping the discipline itself, where they can tell us, as we discussed on Wednesday, where their nets are snagging, where so that these little clues can help us identify where potential sites could be, or whether it's something worth examining further. So communal support, especially in archaeology, is very, very important. And to develop those, it's actually very simple. Involving them is not as complex as scientific training or
So I think
training.
Amer and we gonna conduct a 2-day session. Hopefully, what do you say?
We can do. We probably need to work it out.
Exactly.
And once
Exactly.
it's sort of there, I think we'd be very interested in if there are members of your dive club that would like to get involved.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
There are more than 1,000 certified divers in Pakistan.
Yeah.
1,000?
Yeah, more than 1,000. Yeah, somewhere
That's
around.
amazing.
But they are not, active divers, but still, they're another field into scuba diving. You take pictures because it's an interesting field. Rather than you hunt fish underwater, why don't you find something that would be last longer? That would be much better. Yeah.
So I think it's very important for us to use this community that we have at Indus Scuba and the larger sort of Pakistani diving community to sort of send out these messages that sort of adjust the way people look at things. So a lot of the time when we've brought up maritime archaeology, the first thing people say is, treasure hunting. We get to find gold and we get to find all of this stuff and keep it. Whereas if you can look at it in a way that's a lot more helpful to everyone else, is that you flag it up and then you send it off for study, and then sort of so that everyone can share whatever has been found, as opposed to it being a sort of treasure hunting approach, which is very exciting, but it can also be like healthy treasure hunting where everyone gets to reap the benefits of whatever is discovered. And also, and we touched on this last time as well, the fact that they're just in this conversation, you'd be able to, I'm sure you'd be able to identify the different things you can do with diving. It's not just going and having fun. A lot of the time people say that diving is purely recreational or adventure sports and everything. No, it can actually be used as there are professions attached to it and dependent on the skills that you learn. So, yeah.
And apart from blowing bubbles and taking pictures and hunting fish, you can do much, many things with scuba diving. So great. Okay, guys, we'll be coming back after a short break. Just don't go anywhere.
Let the explorer in you revel in an adventure of a lifetime and discover scuba diving with Indus Scuba, Pakistan's only PADI 5-star dive center, where you can dive into the beautiful waters and conquer your fears. Dive into life and enjoy the ride. So what are you waiting for? Go on a fun dive with Indus Scuba. For further details, visit Indus Scuba. Let the explorer in you revel in an adventure of a lifetime and discover scuba diving with Indus Scuba, Pakistan's only PADI 5-star dive center, where you can dive into the beautiful waters and conquer your fears. Dive into life and enjoy the ride. So what are you waiting for? Go on a fun dive with Indus Scuba. For further details, visit Indus Scuba. Let Let the explorer in you revel in an adventure of a lifetime and discover scuba diving with Indus Scuba, Pakistan's only PADI 5-star dive center, where you can dive into the beautiful waters and conquer your fears. Dive into life and enjoy the ride. So what are you waiting for? Go on a fun dive with Indus Scuba. For further details, visit Indus Scuba. Let the explorer in you revel in an adventure of a lifetime and discover scuba diving with Indus Scuba, Pakistan's only PADI 5-star dive center, where you can dive into the beautiful waters and conquer your fears. Dive into life and enjoy the ride. So what are you waiting for? Go on a fun dive with Indus Scuba. For further details, visit Indus Scuba. Let the explorer in you revel in an adventure of a lifetime and discover scuba diving with Indus Scuba, Pakistan's only PADI 5-star dive center, where you can dive into the beautiful waters and conquer your fears. Dive into life and enjoy the ride. So what are you waiting for? Go on a fun dive with Indus Scuba. For further details, visit Indus Scuba. Let the explorer in you.
Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back to our seventh broadcast session. We have Amer Khan and Heba Hashimi. Back to you, Heba. You're talking something about maritime something, so you can continue.
That thing, maritime. Okay, so
we were focused on Pakistan, by the way.
Yeah. No, I mean the conversation is very exciting when we talk about what the possibilities are. They're endless because there's nothing here by way of infrastructure for maritime archaeology at the moment. And when we've been talking about how we want to get started, there are so many different avenues, and to actually pick which one to go down first has been a bit of a challenge. But we have a few ideas which would be helpful, I think, for everyone if we started off with something like that. And one of those things is building a maritime heritage inventory, which is literally just putting together a database of the sites that we have found in the water along the coast and then on the coastline itself on land. Do you want to talk a little bit about the database aspect of it?
Well, that's just a technical thing, but really the sorts of information that builds an inventory is really the existing historic information. So you start off with a desktop study of understanding the historic sources and really linking them to known sites. So the idea with an inventory is to document what we already know. Okay, so we start with that.
So, keeping that question in mind, do we have something in Pakistan waters? I mean, as per
there are modern shipwrecks that people know about in the diving community.
Okay.
From what I understand, there are, I'm sure, organizations like the Navy, for instance,
because you found a Mughal ship off coast to Sri Lanka. Definitely, the Mughals were here.
Exactly.
This is part of the Maritime Silk Route.
Silk Road,
yeah.
yes.
So if you think about people traveling across Africa, Persian Gulf to India and beyond, they didn't like traveling in the open ocean. It was unsafe. They didn't really have a good way of figuring out where they were, so they would follow the coastline. And if you need to get from Oman to Ceylon and Sri Lanka today, you have to follow this coastline. And so the Makran coast and the Indus Delta were the highway.
Oh.
So this is where you're going to have lots of vessels traveling across. So it's important to understand where we are in the world and the role that this coastline has played in world trade. The Maritime Silk Route traveled through the Indian Ocean and crossed along the Pakistani coastline. The land-based route, Silk Route, went through Pakistan as well, and so this is quite unique. It's one of those special points along these routes where both the maritime and the land routes actually went through the same region. So this comes back to what we were talking about earlier with potential. There are these fort structures in the delta. There are, I understand, some lists at least of underwater sites that possibly might exist with the relevant authorities. But that's those are kind of the bits and pieces we want to draw together to build the core part of this inventory. This is known information, right? So we haven't even stepped a toe in the water yet, but we have a list, and we can start with that. And then it's about doing surveys and going out and talking to the fishing community, running side scans, sonar surveys in areas of high potential where the historic information and the desktop study we've done reflects that this is an area, has historic use, is likely to have an underwater, a footprint of underwater sites. And so that's how you start focusing in on prioritizing which sites to do the actual physical survey work. And once you do those remote sensing surveys or using the geophysical tools, then you identify, okay, these are interesting spots, we need to go and actually dive them. And that is when we're going to need divers.
Well, that's step 2.
That is probably step 2, 3, 4, and 5.
Okay.
There are a number of steps, but we're going to need people to get involved with that process. So it's hard to say how far we are from that, but that's the sequence. In a nutshell, is you understand what's historically known,
right.
You understand what people today understand and are aware of, then you can start visiting those sites, but then you also start assessing new areas and seeing if you can detect underwater sites from that, and then you go and investigate them further.
And I mean, these are several PhDs, several PhD topics lined up.
But if you need support from certified divers, definitely we do have very amazing divers who can help you guys.
Yeah.
So I'm definitely. Heba, I think you are going to do some workshop at Bahrain University, something?
Yes. So
what's it all about?
So at the moment, there's no academic sort of program for maritime archaeology in Pakistan, and what we were hoping to do was to introduce it at Bahrain University, because they have a very strong maritime science department, and within that there is a lot of sort of scope to fit maritime archaeology in there as well. And that will hopefully start in January, so their next term. But before then, there'll be a talk to introduce it to the students, which is hopefully either next week or the week after that.
Okay.
But I can give you more information as soon as I have it. And that'll be an interesting sort of discussion or sort of introduction for students into the academic side of maritime archaeology. So understanding our maritime history. Again, from the Indus Valley Civilization all the way up to the Mughals and beyond.
I think Bahrain University has a dedicated department for it. It's NEMA, National Institute of Maritime Affairs.
So there are two aspects. There's the academic side of things, where you have the disciplines of marine geology, geophysics, and environmental sciences, and maritime studies. And then there's the sort of research arm of things, which is the NCMPR and the National Institute of Maritime Affairs. Yes. So they're sort of spearheading maritime research, and I think it will be a great opportunity for us to maybe start a few projects with them in archaeology as well. So we're going at, it's a two-pronged approach where we're covering both aspects, academic and fieldwork or research, active research.
Interesting.
So I mentioned this last time. There you are, students. Please gear up.
Yeah.
Gear up. No, it'll be interesting. It'll be fun for them as well, I think.
Perfect. So Amer, just for the sake of maritime archaeology, I mean the whole thing, do you need anything from any requirement or a request from the relevant authority if we can able to bridge between you and them? Do you need any help from them?
Where should we begin?
Yes, financials part is a one part of the thing.
Sure.
What else?
It's a good question. There are a few components that fit into sort of a national strategy around heritage and particularly maritime heritage. That sort of having a sustainable funding model is definitely something to consider about how do we actually get this up and running. But it's a conversation that has, first we have to demonstrate the value of it. Sorry.
No problem.
We have to demonstrate the value of it.
Okay.
But what's needed? So we talked about the inventory. It might be something about looking at legislation, seeing if there's a legislative gap around protecting sites underwater.
We do have.
We do have some.
Not in the water, but definitely sites over the surface.
Absolutely.
We do have.
Yeah.
Then there's the question of the human resource. I mean, we need the skill set here. We need to have people who are divers, but have an interest in history, have an interest in technology in terms of geophysics, have an interest in
So
chemistry.
what we can do is, we do have people who have their interest in history, but we can make them divers.
Absolutely.
I do.
Absolutely.
It works both ways.
Yeah.
I mean, either divers can get trained in what needs to be done to help us out with archaeology, or people from any discipline can adapt their knowledge to a maritime context, and
Exactly. So one thing we haven't really talked about is conservation, which is a big part of this. And really, the skill set there is chemistry. If someone's got a degree in chemistry and they're interested and they love diving, that is something that would be fantastic, because there's a whole career in conservation science around marine objects or recovered marine objects. So preservation of sites both in water and recovered material. Museums. I mean, at the end of the day, we have to communicate the value to the broader public. And while you can have a relevant authority that does it's like the government authority that protects these sites, you then have to have a way of communicating that to the people, to the community. And government officials aren't experts at that. You need a museum person. That's the skill set you need, a communicator. And so a museum that can look at the research opportunities around underwater cultural heritage. And there may be some possibilities in Pakistan already, but that would be another component. So having a regulatory authority, having a museum, and then having a university where you're building that human resource. Those are sort of the three components you need to get a program up and running. It has to sit within a funding model that enables it, and then you can get some runs on the board, do some projects, deliver on those projects, demonstrate the value, and from there it'll grow. It'll grow in the direction of where the archaeology is taking us. So
that's because you talked about Makan Coastal Highway that is in Balochistan, and the other part is a Sindh. So we need federal level involvement rather than provincial level, because I think
the good thing about maritime context is that beyond 12 nautical miles, it is a federal subject, or it's a federal discussion. And in terms of research, in terms of national research, that's also a federal subject. So I think the key word here is collaboration between because at least in a maritime context you're dealing with two provinces and then the federal government. So collaboration, one big happy family, helping each other out to really sort of get to a goal that's greater than all three. And I think in terms of, and whether that's reflected in legislation or whether it's just intergovernmental partnerships, I think it just, that's what's needed.
I think there was one, just when it came to the people who would like to get involved, there's one missing ingredient that I forgot to mention.
Yes, please.
So you can have your chemistry background, your history background, you can be a diver. The missing ingredient, if you want to be a maritime archaeologist, is you have to have a sense of adventure. That is it. Yeah. Because you will love what you do, and that sense of adventure will propel you through it. So if you can find a combination of diving,
adventure,
your technical skill set, and a sense of adventure, you're there.
Fine. This is where the Indiana Jones and the Atlantis and all that other fun stuff comes in. It is important, because if you don't want to find things and you don't want to actually get the work done.
Thank you very much, Heba, for joining in, coming again and again. Right? It's really a pleasure.
I'll be back soon, I'm sure.
Amer साहब, बहुत शुक्रिया आने का. Inshallah, we'll have another long session with you alone. Definitely, Heba, you'll be invited. Don't worry about it.
I am done. मैंने जो बोला मैंने बोल दिया.
definitely after a few, I
Too.
think after a few months, if you are into the same thing,
As a
you'll have,
refresher, yeah,
yes,
we
you
would have
you'll have
done
more
more,
information about
yeah.
Pakistan. बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया जिन लोगों ने ज्वाइन इन किया है. Really appreciate it who joined into the maritime study. My name is Mustafa. It's about time we have to sign off. It's already 8:05. Again, I'm thankful to Mr. Amer Saab. बहुत शुक्रिया. Heba, Hashimi, thank you very much. Guys, inshallah next Friday we'll have another 2 amazing people coming in. People from ORP, Olive Ridley Project Pakistan, the main coordinator, along with the fishermen, right? They'll be here next Friday, or they'll be bringing in more things, step by step. कैसे वो जो ghost net होता है वो कैसे recover होता है, फिर उसको धोते कैसे, and then they sort it out and they make some products. इंशाल्लाह अगली दफ़ा के लिए thank you very much. खुदाफिज. पाकिस्तान जिंदाबाद.